What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today we are finally getting to the first bit of testimony in my criminal trial in Snohomish County, Washington. So when I left you last time, we had just selected the jury. I got back to the unit, and again, by some freaking miracle, I was able to get good sleep. So I was fresh and ready to go. For day one. I mean, you know, day one was jury selection. Day two was going to be opening arguments and excuse me, there's my burp for the video, and initial testimony. So we get to the courtroom. My parents are in the courtroom. My dad and my stepmom had come up from Dallas, and none of her family showed. The only people in the courtroom were from my side. I think I'll just leave it at that. And so, obviously I can't remember the order of events, whether it was the prosecution or my defense attorney. Each side gets to make opening arguments, basically presenting their version of the case. Obviously, the state it paints a narrative that I have, that I'm a monster who has held his wife and infant son at gunpoint. I have viciously strangled her and tried to kill her, and that I have unlawfully imprisoned her in her home, and that I've threatened to kill her, and that I have assaulted her physically. Another thing that they had done, well, I guess it hadn't been done yet. So obviously my side, when Leonard, so first of all, to paint the picture for you so that you can kind of get a visual. And if you guys want to look these two people up, the prosecuting attorney was named George Apple, Jeorgeappel, I believe. He's now a judge. And then Leonard Nahiski, and I can't remember the exact spelling. It was Najaski or something. Like I said, he's from Bellevue, Washington. You can look him up. Leonard is just like this very good-looking guy. He's got a good build to him. He was wearing one of the nicest suits I've ever seen. There's no telling how much the suit cost. He just had a way about him. My attorney had a confidence without being overly arrogant. He was soft but direct. He had these big piercing blue eyes, if I remember correctly. And he just had a great demeanor. He was the kind of guy that, again, if you met him in conversation and you started talking to him, you would like him and you would want to believe what he was telling you. On the opposing side, there's George Apple, and obviously I'm biased. He had to be maybe one of the least likable people I've ever seen in life. He was very short man. Not very attractive features. He had glasses. He had kind of a puffy face. He wore these suspenders that he was constantly like rubbing his fingers through. He was very arrogant, very condescending, very aggressive, just a nasty, filthy worm of a man. And I say that I'm biased, but as the trial proceeds, you can clearly tell that he's not liked by the jury, but I'll save that because it's really part of my testimony. So on my side, at least, you've got this man who's very likable, very good-looking guy, very well-spoken. He's just a very likable person. And then on the other side of the case, you have something kind of like Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. He's just kind of a troll, and so everything he says just is so nasty, and he kind of represents what a lot of people hate in attorneys and prosecutors. If you've ever, watched a trial, he just was not a likable guy. So my attorney comes out and he basically preps the case that, again, what you're going to hear is a lot of hearsay. And that what we are going to do is that we are going to prove conclusively that we are going to disprove conclusively each single element in this case, that they could not possibly have taken place the way that the alleged victim claims that they have. And then he reminds them of their commitments to, be fair and impartial and whatever. So at this point in the trial, George Apple calls his first witness, which is my wife, the victim. Her name's Amanda. I won't give you more information than that. So Amanda was very, very attractive girl in the face. She was always very tan. She had sort of an Italian, I think she has some Italian blood. She always had very lustrous, shiny brown hair, big doe eyes, even though they have a bit of a Treacher Collins kind of wide separation to them. Look, she did look a bit syndrome-y, but very pretty face, okay? Not so much on the body side. She was thinnish, but nothing like Sarah. And she comes waltzing into the courtroom in this gray, like, I don't know if it was, Sarah has a dress very similar to this actually. Not flannel, I don't know what the material was, but it was gray, form-fitting, and very form-fitting. And I believe she had like some pantyhose, like some black pantyhose on. And when she walked into the room, Amanda's air, especially back then, is that she's the Queen of England. And so she had she's always had like a constant resting bitch face. And so despite the fact that she's very, very pretty to look at, she can also be extremely off-putting because she just carries this very disgusting air about her. Like literally my shit doesn't stink. And so she just kind of comes floating into the courtroom. And right out the gate, I start making eye contact with some of the jurors, and you can see some of them are looking at her, and some of the men, and maybe they're thinking, oh, she's attractive looking. The women in the jury, you can tell immediately hate her. There's no woman on this jury that just like, you see a person for the first time and you just get a feel. And so these jurors have now been here for an entire day. They've heard a lot of information. They're now back for day 2. They've kind of gotten to know me through the entire first day, or at least they've been exposed to my face and my mannerisms and my general attitude. And so in walks the person that's going to supposedly convince them of my guilt. And just at face value, there's just nothing likable about her other than that she is attractive. And so women tend to hate her. This was something that was true even when, and maybe it's jealousy or whatever, but she just has some quality that really rubs people the wrong way, especially females. So here you have a situation that's already working really well in my favor because it's a girl claiming to be abused by a man. And you would think that the women in the room would be on her side. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. But because she's so cunty looking, they by nature they're kind of not on her side. They did not seem to react well to her general appearance. So she takes the stand. And she looks up at me for the first time since the night. We have not seen each other since my arrest. And I know I wasn't allowed to communicate with her in any way, obviously, or make any threatening gestures or anything. But I looked her dead in her eyes, and I hit her with like the saddest eyes that I could make. And I kind of just shook my head, kind of just tilted my head down like, please don't do this. That's what I was thinking. I can't convey it to her. But that's kind of like, if I could convey something, that's what I was like projecting from my body. Like, please don't do this. And she took one look at me and she started crying on the stand. And so they tried to compose her and she couldn't get it together and she's hiding her eyes. And so they had to fucking immediately exit the jury right out the gate, and her and the prosecutor and everybody go out in the hallway. I guess there was somebody else in the room, now that I think about it, which was the victims' advocates. So all along this process, the state is bringing these charges. My wife did not bring, my ex-wife did not, my wife at the time, she did not bring the charges against me. She merely made the report and the state picked up the charges, and so I'm being prosecuted by the state, and the state assigns victims, these women who are just typically these horrid creatures who are just man haters. They've been done wrong by somebody, and they've just completely given up on life, and they have an axe to grind, and they just tell these women, I know this because of what Amanda told me after our trial. We ended up, when I got out of prison, we had communication again. So she told me that they were constantly pushing her to testify, that they were, anytime that she would have a moment of weakness and say, you know, I really love my husband and I don't want to see him go to prison, they were like, no, he's evil, he's going to get out, he's going to get you. And so it's this entire programmed thing. The state does not care about the truth. They only care about conviction rate. And so they will assign an army of victims advocates to a woman who will basically browbeat her into testifying against her husband because they are just convinced that we're all evil. And so she goes out in the hall, and the victims advocates rush out there with her, and Apple goes out there, and I look to my attorney, and I'm like, well, what's going to happen if she can't testify? And he says, if she can't testify, they will have to drop this case right here and there. So of course there's this moment of excitement, but he's like, don't get excited. He's like, I know Apple, and he's gonna tell her what she needs to hear to get her back on that stand. I don't know what the fuck he told her, but when she came back in, this bitch was fucking stoic. The problem is, again, she was already unlikable, and when she came in, she had to put like a war face on because she really was quaking. She was really losing her nerve. And so when she came back in to testify the second time, now she appears like she's got an axe to grind. And so everything that is coming from her is very hostile. It's very sharp-tongued. It's very, very venomous. And it's not settling. It just doesn't, I think it didn't sit well with the jury. So George Apple starts asking her to explain the events of the night. Now understand that my ex-wife was a very attractive woman. She was not a very smart woman. Not by a very long shot is she a smart woman. She cannot read a map. Okay? She cannot read a map and then follow those directions in 3D space. Before we got GPS like in the car, she could barely drive by herself. She'd get lost all the time. So her ability to tell a believable story just in general is a struggle for her. And so she sets out to explain what happened the night of the alleged attack. She explains that we had gone out drinking and that we had left our infant son at home alone during the event. So I don't remember if I mentioned this. I didn't know how far this was going to go. Our infant son was like 17 months old. And so when we left she testified that when we left the condo that night, that I had a Bluetooth with, you know, like the old Bluetooth thing that hangs on your ear, that I had connected that to my phone and put it in his room, and then called her phone and put the Bluetooth in the crib so we could use it like a mobile baby monitor. We could hear him. We tested it. We could hear him, you know, cooing or moving around in this crib. And so the original plan was that we were just going to go down the street, like a couple of minutes, have a few drinks, come back. If the fire alarm went off, anything happened, we were right there. We could be there at the drop of a dime. So she's testifying how I coerced her into doing this, that she didn't feel good about it, and so that the whole night was kind of already in a bad tone. And then we went out and we started drinking, and that we'd been having a good time, and everything was going good until I got very heavily intoxicated, and she accused me of making threats against people on the road when we were driving back to our condo. She said that I had made a statement like, what if we just follow these people to see where they go? And that upset her, and that she started like, and that's what started the fight, put her in a bad mood. And that I was basically like, you know, fuck you, you know, just leave me alone. And so she testified, I got home, that I started trying to play a video game, and that a fight ensued over medical insurance, and that I was basically refusing to talk to her. She said that the fight it accelerated into the point that I admitted that I was planning on divorcing her, and that I contacted my dad by phone and said basically that I wanted her to leave and that I was willing to put her on a plane to get her the fuck out of the house. And she said that when my dad refused to fly her out, that I became belligerent. She claimed that the fight had gone on and that I had gone into the bedroom and gotten a bottle of perfume and smashed it on the floor, and that I had retrieved her clothing and smashed it on the floor, and that she'd gotten upset about it, except she said that I turned on her, not that she charged at me, and that I attacked her and that I punched her repeatedly in the face, that I had beat on her head and punched her repeatedly in the face. She testified that it was at that point that she ran away from me, that she got away from me, that she ran into my son's room, and that she picked up my son and she was holding him inside of his room. She testified that I stood in the doorway of our apartment and that I pulled what I said 9mm, that was inaccurate actually, that I pulled my 40 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol out of my inside the pants holder, that I pointed it at her head and said, if you don't put Adam back in the crib, I'm going to fucking blow your head off. She said that she initially refused to put Adam in the crib, and that I had taken the gun out of the clip, and I had jacked one of the bullets out of the barrel and dry fired the gun at her. She reported that I had intended to dry fire the gun at her while the magazine was still in the gun, and that luckily I checked because the round was already chambered, and that when I unchambered it, she claimed that I said, "Oh, that was close." And so she said that I then put the magazine back in the gun and chambered one by one every one of the rounds out of the fucking gun all over so they're just kicking out of my 40 caliber Smith & Wesson. They're flying out of the gun and they're landing all over the floor in my son's bedroom. The lights were off in the room, and she testified that I put the gun down on the counter in his bedroom, and that at that point she agreed, because she was so afraid that I had almost shot her. She agreed to put her son down in the crib because she just wanted to protect him, and that she tried to go out of his bedroom. She claimed that at this point that I grabbed her and threw her into the bathroom. So our son, so there was like we had a long hallway that had a T intersection at the end. And so down here would be my son's bedroom. At the end of the T would go straight into the bathroom that would be right here. And then this little section here would be our bedroom. So this is basically the way the condo was aligned. So she claimed that I drug her forcibly from Adam's doorway and threw her into the bathroom floor, where she says that I then grabbed her by her neck and was choking her to the point that she thought she was going to lose consciousness. She said that I choked her and threatened to kill her, and that when I noticed that she was losing consciousness, that I got scared. This is her testimony. That I got scared and let go of her, and then she was kind of confused at that point as to how she managed to get from the bathroom, but she remembered in some disordered fashion getting a hold of a cordless phone, that I took the phone from her, ripped the battery out, and then she ran down the hall to try to escape the condo. She testified that we were playing like the cat and mouse game around the couch, that I was threatening to kill her, and that eventually she ran and fled out the door screaming bloody murder, and that she ran, that I tried to chase her. She said that the spaghetti strap shirt, that I broke it while I was strangling her in the bathroom, and that she then got out of the apartment, and that she ran immediately next door. She said that she ran to the next door neighbor and started pounding on their door. This is like 3:30 in the morning, so she's pounding on the door. She testified that eventually the girl that was living there, I probably shouldn't name, this is all a matter of public record, but we'll just call her Rachel. That Rachel came to the door and said, come in. She was crying, said, come in. And that she had just barely gotten into the door when she heard me peel the tires of my truck, peel out and leave the scene of the crime. She testified that the amount of time that lapsed from the last time she saw me until she heard my tires peel out was 45 seconds. She said it couldn't have been, it was like 45 seconds, like at a maximum, that I had immediately fled the apartment in fear because she claimed that I knew how much trouble I was in. So she is now inside the neighbor's apartment, and she calls 911. And so they play on the stand her recorded 911 call, and she, on the 911 call, she says she reported that I had just pointed a handgun at her. She didn't mention any of the other allegations. She said on the 911 call, I need help. My husband just threatened to kill me. He pointed a loaded handgun at me. And they're like, where is he at? Are you safe? It's, the whole back and forth with the 911 call. She's frantic on the phone. She's like, no, he left, but I need, police officers to get here right away. So of course, some large number of police officers show up at the scene, and so then the neighbors, are all outside, and now like the investigation process of this situation is ongoing while I am off doing what I said in the beginning. I've left and I've gone to Walmart. So the cops put out an APB for my vehicle. So when I told you earlier in one of the videos that when I was leaving Walmart, the 2 cop cars pulled up, they were actually looking for me. Why they went to Walmart or how, I don't know how all that works, but there was a APB out for my vehicle and my description. And so they're now inside the apartment starting the investigation. And so they're asking her to give her statement about what happened. And then she reported that I called her on the phone, like I told you that I did, and that I threatened to kill her on the phone, which is what I believe where they got the harassment charge. I can't remember. So she says that I threatened to kill her on the phone. And then of course, I return eventually to the condo where I'm arrested. So this, of course, is all her testimony under oath that the prosecution is extracting from her. So they're asking her questions and she's giving them her answers. Now, please rest assured that, it's impossible for me to testify the way she testified. So what I just told you was a very cogent, a flow of events. When she's on the stand testifying, there's a whole bunch of I don't remembers, I thinks, I'm not sure, I think we were in this room, then she would change up the story. But basically the events that I just expressed to you are eventually what George Apple, the prosecutor, was able to get out of her. So once she's done giving her sort of unedited version of events that is elicited by the prosecutor. My attorney gets to cross-examine her. So my attorney immediately starts walking back through the series of events, getting the details and coming across the various inconsistencies that I have told him that exist in this story. So he asks her, so the first point of contention is the claim that I beat her like repeatedly about her face. So she claimed that I punched her multiple times in the face, and in the follow-up days to her reporting the crime, she was constantly in communication with a detective who was getting the story out, and they did follow-up videos and photos and everything. And so they had admitted into evidence a number of pieces of information. So while they're eliciting her testimony, they have input into evidence pictures of the broken perfume bottle, the clothing that was all over the floor. They input a picture of the cordless phone that was missing the battery. They had a picture taken of her face where on the night of the event there were no marks on her face. And then they take pictures the days after, and you can eventually see a small bruise appear in this region, generally here. No black eyes, no other battering to her face. They took pictures of her neck, which will end up being incredibly important in a minute. And she had scratches on the right side of her neck, and the scratches were deep in the front of her neck, and they trailed off. They got lighter and narrower as the scratches moved this way across her neck, and there were 3 of them. So this is the evidence that they have included in that they have admitted during her testimony, and she explained all of the things that you were looking at. She testified that the strangulation, that the marks on her neck were due to me strangling her with my fingers, that my fingers put the bruises on her neck. So my attorney asks her to account for the fact that she repeated being punched multiple times in the face, and yet there was really relatively small bruising. And this is one of the first times that she starts misremembering and says, you know, I wasn't so much focused on him punching me. That wasn't the issue. It was just that, you know, he pointed a gun at me and he threatened to kill me. And so, like, you know, that was the bigger thing. Like, I don't remember, you know, I just remember that I was very scared and that he hit me. It's like, okay. So then he takes her to the bedroom where she claims that I pointed the handgun at her, and he asks her to reiterate the story. So he says, so Mr. Van Dusen pointed the gun at you, and he attempted to dry fire it, but before he pulled the trigger, he checked to see if it was loaded, confirmed that it was loaded, ejected the loaded round, and then removed the magazine. And she said, where did he put the magazine? She's like, I don't know. I don't remember. I said, okay. So then he dry fired it then? And she said, no, I think he put the magazine back in the clip and then ejected all of the and she's getting all confused. So she says, I just remember that he ejected all 16 rounds out of the clip and dry fired the gun at me and said, ooh, that was close. And he said, so you feel like he was trying to kill you, or that he wanted to kill you? And of course she's like, well, yeah, he pointed a fucking handgun at me in front of my kid. And he said, okay, so then what? So then you claim, so did you flee him? How did you get past him? And she testified, well, he let me leave. And he says, okay, so it's your testimony that Mr. Van Dusen just pointed a loaded handgun at you and threatened to kill you with it, and then voluntarily didn't, and then basically disarmed himself completely. Where's the gun at this point? And she's like, well, it was in the bedroom. And so another piece of evidence that had been admitted into the trial, the police, when the police arrived on the scene, they took a picture of where they found the gun. And the gun was in my jacket pocket in the living room with all 16 rounds of the magazine. The magazine was in the gun, and the gun was not chambered or cocked. And so he begins to ask her, so you said the gun was in the bed. How did the gun get? And she said, well, I don't know. And so I don't remember. And he said, okay, well, man, this is important information. So you're testifying that he basically disarmed himself. He ejected all the rounds out of the clip, and then they were scattered all over the floor. Where did he put the gun before you guys left the room? And she said, well, he put it on the night. He definitely didn't have it on him after that. So he must have put it down somewhere in my son's room. So, okay, so how did you get out of the bedroom? And she says, well, he let me out. And he's like, okay, so he just threatened to kill you with a gun. Then he voluntarily disarmed himself. Then he left the bullets in the gun all over your son's room. And then the two of you exited your son's room. And she said, yeah, I walked out in front of him. He walked out behind me. And then he got angry again and grabbed me and threw me into the bathroom. And he said, okay, and then, so it's your testimony that while you were in the bathroom, Mr. Van Dusen strangled you to the point that you were losing consciousness. And she says, yes. And he said, how did you know you were losing consciousness? And she was like, well, I mean, I just thought I was going to lose consciousness. And he's like, okay, so he's strangling you, and why did you think you were losing consciousness? And she's like, well, I couldn't breathe, and I guess things started getting hazy. And he said, okay, so which direction were you facing? And she's like, what do you mean? And he said, when he was strangling you, were you on your stomach or your back? And she was like, I don't remember. And he said, well, do you remember what you were wearing the night of the event? And she said, oh yeah, I was wearing a white spaghetti strap top and a coral colored skirt. And he's like, okay, so you can tell me what you were wearing 7 months ago on the night of your husband's arrest, but you don't recall whether you were looking him in the face while he was strangling you to, as you said, the point that you were losing consciousness. You can't remember if you were looking at him or looking at the floor. And she said, she's getting frustrated on the stand. No, I don't remember. And so this goes back to the setup question that he had asked of the jury after they had been selected. Because see, we knew that she didn't have this information. We knew she couldn't recall the details of the alleged strangulation because she had already been asked these questions in her deposition. So Leonard knew how to set the stage to prove to a potential jury that she was lying about this event. So if you'll recall, he polled the jury to find out if anybody in the jury had ever been in a life or death situation, and asked the ones who said that they had whether or not they had good recall of that experience. And 100% of the people said that they had super recall, that they recalled this like it happened yesterday. And here you have a witness who's testifying that she can remember with perfect clarity what fucking clothes she was wearing. But she's not exactly certain where exactly the gun that she was almost shot with is in the apartment. And she can't recall whether she was looking at her assailant or whether her assailant was smearing her face into the carpet when she was strangled. So as you can see, her testimony is beginning to unravel on the stand. And the more he begins to impeach her credibility, the more you can see the jurors are starting to make facial contact with me. They're listening to what she's saying. They're looking at me. They're looking at her. And you get the feel in the room that these people are starting to figure out, at a bare minimum, this witness is not being completely honest. And so she goes on to explain that that I was strangling her, and she can't remember whether she was looking at me or not. And when I realized that she was losing consciousness, that's when I got scared and let her go. And so Leonard again asks, "Ma'am, how could he know you were losing consciousness if you can't recall whether he was even looking at you? If he was strangling you face down, how could he possibly know that you were on the verge of losing consciousness?" And again, she was very frustrated because she could not remember. And so he allows her to progress to expressing that she tried to call 911. I grabbed the phone, ripped the battery out of the phone, threw it on the floor where it was photographed by the police. That she ran down the hall, that I was continuing to verbally threaten her, and that she was running around the couch, and that eventually she put her best like Barry Sanders move on me and juked me and was able to get toward the front door, and that I was chasing her, and so she started screaming bloody murder, and that I let her go. She ran out the front door into the night screaming. She testified that she ran, I think I mentioned this already, she testified that, you know, like I said, like I said earlier, that she testified that she ran next door, and that there was no more than 45 seconds from the time that she last saw me before she heard the tires peel out of my car. So to bring to close her testimony, here are the important facts. She has claimed a physical level of assault that was not consistent with the pictures that were taken. She's claimed that I threatened to shoot her with a handgun, that I then voluntarily unloaded all over the floor and left the gun in some undisclosed location that she can't remember. She testified that I strangled her to the point of nearly losing consciousness and got afraid that I was going to kill her, which you would assume would be the intention, but that I got afraid when she started to lose consciousness, but she could not recall which direction she was facing when this took place, but she could recall with absolute certainty that she was wearing a white spaghetti strap top and a coral colored skirt. She could recall with absolute certainty that despite the fact that there were 16 rounds, 16 bullets on the floor in the dark, scattered all over my son's room, and that the handgun presumably was empty on his dresser in the bedroom, and that I definitively did not have the gun on my person when I was chasing her around in the living room. It was her testimony that I was peeling my tires out in no more than 45 seconds after she last saw me, which is going to become very important later, because once again, the handgun was found with 16 rounds in the magazine in the clip, and the clip in the gun in the living room. Is this starting to sound like a Clue game? When the police arrived on the scene, and they were the first people to spot the firearm since it had been in my possession. So that brings us to the end of her initial recall of the events. So after she is dismissed from the stand, I believe there was a recess for lunch, and I was put down in a holding cell, and her testimony had gone, in my estimation, horrifically bad. Again, when I'm retelling this, hopefully it's clear how many major holes there are in the story, but I'm still telling it very rapidly and very concisely, and when it was being brought out of her on the stand, You know what you could do is you could kind of imagine Amber Heard on the stand. This is kind of my wife. The way that Amber Heard couldn't really remember things, and she didn't have a good job. She didn't do a good job of telling stories, and her body language didn't match up what she claimed was happening. The only thing Amanda didn't do at all that Heard did was she didn't look at the jury at all. She was always constantly looking at the prosecutor or constantly looking at my attorney under cross-examination. The prosecutor then got the chance to like try to re-corroborate some of the information, but when he recrossed her, she only started fumble fucking it up even more. It was almost apparent like she just wanted to get up and leave the stand. She was clearly done with testifying. She couldn't recall anything in particular detail, and everything that she said supposedly happened was starting to unravel in her face. And this was the first time that you could start to tell that the prosecution realized they had a big fucking problem on their hands. So she is taken off the stand, and they then called some really insignificant witnesses. They called the couple whose apartment she ran to the night of the event. Again, I won't give their names. The female testified to, again, some unimportant details that Amanda arrives at the door in the middle of the night. They were asleep. There's this banging on the door. They go to the door. She's there, and then they hear the tires peel out. They were asked if they felt like her accounting of the time frame of the tires peeling was accurate, and both of them were like, I don't, it was almost immediate to them because they had just woken up. So the female who was living there was clearly more on her side, and she gave a couple of extra details, basically just that you could tell that Amanda was genuinely scared and that she was distraught, and but they didn't know us at all. Like, they couldn't give any like character assassination or we'd only ever hung out with these people one time. And so when they interviewed this girl's boyfriend, he basically was like, I don't know anything, dude. Like, she came over, she was upset. I guess they had a fight. He left. He got arrested. Man, like, fuck, I don't know. He was just like, I don't know why I'm even here. And so at this point, they start to bring out the independent police officers who either arrived at the scene or who interacted with me during my arrest. And so the first officers they bring out are the ones who approached the car when I came. Actually, the first officer that was there when I made the phone call. And the only real important testimony there was that the officer testified that he had no recall of ever hearing me threaten to kill her on the phone when I called to, he said that he testified something to the effect of, Mr. Van Dusen asked if he could come back to the house to get his belongings. He offered to let her leave them on the curb, and then once the phone call was done, we were basically moved into position to intercept him when he came back to the house. So the police didn't even corroborate the witness's story that I threatened her on the phone. And then they testified to my demeanor when they approached the vehicle that I was arrested in or adjacent to. The police officers testified to exactly what I told you, which was that they approached a vehicle, an unknown vehicle, that I immediately identified myself as the person that the officer said, and I quote, Mr. Van Dusen said, I think I'm the guy that you're looking for. We got him out of the vehicle. My attorney asked him, was Mr. Van Dusen compliant? And the officers that testified said Mr. Van Dusen was totally compliant. He followed all of our commands. He was not in possession of a firearm. We took him into custody and put him in the car so that we could sort out the events that took place inside of the residence. So again, what we have here is the state is putting forth witnesses, and those witnesses are only corroborating the story that I have told her and are in no way corroborating the story that she has said. I mean, they've corroborated some of the known facts. The apartment was in disarray. There was broken perfume bottles. There was a stench of perfume. There were clothes. There was glass. that the victim looked like she had a contusion on her forehead, that they found the handgun, as I've described it numerous times now, and that I believe my son was, I don't even remember, I think he was still in the crib. At that part I can't recall. There was no other damage to the apartment besides the photographs that they took of the phone that the battery had been ripped apart. And so then one of the most faithful witnesses of the entire trial takes the stand, and this is the police detective who had been interviewing her, taking all of the pictures, and trying to put together the case. He was the one that she had given the journal to. I wrote a journal, like I said in the previous video, and I told her if I ever get arrested, give the police this journal. It's basically my get out of jail free card. And what does she do when I get arrested for a crime she says that I committed? She voluntarily gave them this journal. You can't even script this shit, dude. So, I've got like 5 minutes. Let me see if I can get this out. So, the police detective takes the stand, and he testifies to a lot of things that, again, are totally irrelevant. Nobody really cares about. They're just the general details of the case. And then under cross-examination by my attorney asked the police detective, "Sir, assuming that, because you're in law enforcement, I think it's safe to say that you have loaded a handgun in your life." And the officer's like, "Yeah." He said, "How many times do you think?" And the officer said, "I mean, I don't know. It's like hundreds?" And the officer's like, "Thousands." He's like, "We go to the range, we shoot." He says, I've loaded handgun clips thousands of times in my life." And my attorney, Leonard, says, "How long do you think it would take you to load 16 rounds into a handgun clip?" And the officer's like, "Well, you mean just right out of the box?" And Leonard's like, "Yeah, let's start there." He says, "I don't know, a minute maybe or so. I mean, it just depends if I'm just, feeding them one by one or if I'm using a speed loader or something." And so Leonard said, "So maybe a minute it would take you to load a handgun clip." And he's like, "Yeah, something like that, I guess." And Leonard said, "Well, what if you weren't loading the clip from a box that was sitting right in front of you? What if the bullets had been ejected out of the gun, and so they've flown out of the injection port, and they've flown out of the barrel, and they're all over the floor, and you have to find the bullets and then one by one put them back into the magazine?" And the officer kind of scoffs, like, "Well, I mean, I have no idea. It would depend on a lot of factors. Like, how quickly could I locate the bullets? I mean, what size room? Are they rolling around on the floor?" And he said, "So, in your professional opinion, and you've said that you've loaded a handgun thousands of times in your life, do you think it's possible that a person could search a room and find 16 ejected bullets that have flown out of a gun as they've been ejected out of the chamber all over to the floor? Do you think that you could locate 16 bullets, find them, feed them one by one back into the magazine or the clip, put the clip back in the gun, and then move the gun to another part of the house?" And the officer said, "No, there's no way you could do that." And so my attorney says, "There's no way. You think it's impossible?" And the guy's like, "Again, I mean, I can't, I cannot imagine how you would possibly find 16 bullets and reload the clip. It would be hard enough to accomplish this just in perfect condition sitting at a table." And so my attorney's like, "Thank you, officer. No further questions." So right there again, before I've even taken the stand, the pieces are starting to fit into place. So you've got her testimony that is suspect as can be because she has little to no recall of the events. You've got police officers who were part of the investigative process who have backed every single thing that I have said occurred on the night of the event. You've now got a police detective, a higher ranking officer, saying that he feels like, in his expert opinion, there is no chance that I could have actually done what I was being accused of doing. Because remember, she said the bullets were all over the floor and the gun was in the bedroom. And then I went into the living room and then fled within 45 seconds of her seeing me. So what she actually testified to, without saying it, is that she ran out the front door screaming bloody murder. I must have run down the hall into my son's bedroom, which was dark, located 16 rounds on the floor, fed the rounds one by one back into the clip back into the gun was not chambered, ran back down the hall, put the gun in my jacket, got my keys, got into the car, started the engine, backed it up, and then peeled out down the road in 45 seconds. That's what her narrative says that I must have done, and that narrative is directly connected to her claim that I ever pointed the gun at her. If she's lying about me ejecting the bullets, if she's lying about me being able to put the bullets back into the clip and the clip back into the gun and the gun back into the jacket, then she's almost certainly lying that I ever pointed at her in the beginning. At a bare minimum, it is very, very reasonable to doubt that she is telling the truth. And so I'm sitting here in the witness stand watching this man's case completely unravel from in every facet. So the next witness they call, and mind you, while all of this is going on, the jury, again, we're making eye contact. Juror number 1 has made eye contact with me no fewer than 20 times. He's shaking his head. He's made like wow faces. Like, you're probably not really supposed to be doing this, but they're like juror number 2, who was the female juror. She, on more than one occasion, we would exchange looks where you could tell she was like, this is bullshit. There was a younger guy who was an Asian guy. He was in college at the time, which we found out during voir dire. He had made eye contact, and I could see facial expressions coming from him that he was doubting the case. The younger Indian guy, I think, was juror number 6. Basically, the overwhelming majority of the people in the jury panel, they are not reacting well to this. I'm tracking their facial expressions at every point, and they seem to be hearing this the way I'm hearing it, which is that this shit doesn't make any sense. They were vigorously taking notes throughout the majority of these testimonies. So then they put on the next crucial witness, which is a medical witness who testifies to the wounds that she sustained during the alleged attack. And so the key thing that he actually testified to was to the strangulation. And so the marks that are on her neck, maybe they did, maybe they didn't come from a strangulation. Under cross-examination by my attorney, he was able to elicit that there was not a lot of the typical signs and symptoms of a strangulation, where like knuckle patterns, marks on both sides of the neck, thumb prints in either the front or the back of the neck, fingerprints from where you're actually digging into the person's neck. There's a number of things that typically occur when a person has been strangled, and we're not really seeing those things in any of the photographs that have been taken. And then, like, the coup de grace of the fucking strangulation claim is that, typically speaking, when a person has been strangled, and this is the reason why her claim that she was strangled to near loss of consciousness, for if a person is strangled that viciously, typically what you see is what's called petechial hemorrhaging. It will cause little ruptures in the blood vessels in the eyes, and so the eyes will look bloodshot from the force being applied to the neck. When the medical examiner, or whatever he's called, when they examined her at the police department, they found no signs of petechial hemorrhaging. So really, aside from the scratches on her neck and her own testimony, there is zero evidence that strangulation ever occurred in this case. So again, this is another one of the state's witnesses that Leonard, my attorney, was able to turn and use and build more of our case to suggest that nothing that she was saying was true. And then, if matters could get any worse, the final person, and I can't remember the exact order, but at some point before they had called all the police witnesses, I would say relatively middle of the way through their case, they called her boyfriend to the stand. And so when they call her boyfriend in, the jury doesn't know who this guy is at first, I don't believe. And so this is the first time I've seen him. This guy comes walking in the most decrepit gray suit you've ever seen in your life. Tall, skinny guy. He was supposedly a firefighter. I would not want this man to try to pull me out of a fucking building. We were both young, so he's like 15 years older than me and 22 years older than her. And so he's this frail little guy comes walking in, and he takes the stand, and he is very, very proud of himself about something. And so when the prosecutor introduces and says, "Can you tell us your name?" He tells them their name. He says, "Do you know the alleged victim?" He says, "Yes." And he says, "Is it safe to say that you guys you know her?" He said, "How well do you know her?" And he said, "Very well." And he said, "Is it safe to say that your relationship is sexual in nature?" And he looked directly in my eyes and he goes, "Very." Which is such a creepy greaseball thing to say on the stand. So here's this guy who's 22 years older than the woman, the young girl, this 21-year-old girl that's just testified that the jury's now seen. So they see her, and now there's this greaseball fucking loser guy who's sitting up here saying that their relationship is very sexual in nature, and he's very proud of himself. When this happens, juror number 1 is literally holding his pad and pencil because he's been taking notes. Juror number 1 turns and looks at me, and you can see he's pissed in the face. He looks at me and he goes, put his head down. He put his fucking pen and paper down. He never took a note the rest of the fucking trial. When that guy testified that he was sleeping with my wife, which, I mean, we were obviously, I'm not really calling that a legit affair. She was trying to send me to prison. She'd already filed for divorce, but whatever. I mean, she was still my wife. These two, Amanda and this guy, were so off-putting together. Their relationship was so disgusting to the jurors that when this man started testifying, juror number 1 was done. I think this guy was ready to find me not guilty on all counts right then and there. I never even needed to take the fucking stand. And multiple other jurors during the process of her boyfriend testifying, the disgust on their face was just so clear. And the thing that was so funny about it is this guy didn't witness anything. He was not a part of this event in any way, shape, or form. So all he could testify to was that he heard cop cars come and a girl scream really loud and tires peel out. So he provided nothing good for their entire case. And he hamstrung it because it made the jury hate him and hate her. He was so offensive to the jury that he did nothing but hurt their case, and none of his testimony was it. I can't understand for the life of me why they put this man on the stand. I don't know if they were hoping that I would lose my cool and attack him or something. I don't know what the prosecutor was thinking. He wasn't thinking. The reality is that this prosecutor did not see me coming. It's like that line in The Devil's Advocate when Al Pacino says, I'm the hand up Mona Lisa's skirt. I'm the, whatever he says, he's like, they don't see me coming. This prosecutor thought I was some dumb, illiterate hick from Texas and that he was going to walk all over me. He was not prepared for me to walk into that trial ready to come guns blazing and prove every single thing she said was a categorical fucking lie. And I hadn't even got the chance to testify yet. So that was pretty much the close of their witnesses. And so by the time they're done presenting their case, in all honesty, I probably shouldn't have even taken a stand because not a single thing was going well for them. Everything all of their witnesses had either been discredited or had discredited Amanda or were basically building my case from me all the way down to the photographs and the medical examiner and the fucking police detective. So it's just going horribly wrong. The only thing they have left to do is catch me on the stand in my testimony, which is what I will get to next, and tell you the details about how I took the stand facing 12 years in state prison and defended myself against a corrupt government who's trying to fucking prosecute me for crimes I did not commit. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.